All right, gentlemen, welcome back. Today we have Clash of the Titans. We have Girth McSlammer, who is the rank 1 player, and he's been rank 1 for quite some time now. I mean, in terms of elo, there's not many people that are close to catching up. I could be wrong because of the way the player base is, how small it is. I think the elo changes they can be a little bit drastic when you get to the higher end. If you're on the lower end, you're basically in elo hell, especially if you're like me and low pop hours. It takes forever. But yeah, Girth McSlammer, number one World of Dots player, and then .com, who I think because Girth sent me the replay and he put in the message Discord. He thinks that Dot was top 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there, top 15, something like that. But all you need to know is that they know what they're doing, all right? So, an interesting thing that occurs in this battle is that I believe it's Girth who goes down by like 40,000 troops at one point, and then he makes a comeback. And this goes on a theme that I've been talking about on like at least 3 videos that I've posted before. I used to have a theory that there was a certain amount of like troop disparity that basically kind of determined one side having a decisive numerical advantage. And seeing this replay where Girth is down 40,000 and then he starts playing a defensive battle, he manages to equalize that numerical disparity, thereby blowing my theory, my initial theory that I've had for I think about a month now, that it just doesn't work like that. Probably because I've been playing with like a lot of low elo players that I don't think it really holds much water once you have two competent players that kind of know all the mechanics, uh, that it works. So let me just speed up the replay here. So there's going to be a lot of cycling going on in the center and in the south. Um, I don't think that Girth, because I've only skimmed through the replay once, I think like last week. I had to take some time off for making videos. I don't think Girth actually makes any tanks. I think he goes full lights. And I think Dot also goes full lights. Yes. Well, we're going to see anyhow. And the other thing that I do recall is this right here. I keep trying to figure out whether to use the player names or the colors. Okay, in the previous recording, I went with the colors halfway. I'll try to stick with just the player names. So Dot, who is the red player, he leaves his 2 tanks in the forest here to hold the northern front. And Girth, he doesn't do that. He's deployed all his armor into the south, and this, in my opinion, gives him an advantage. He starts making gains. But eventually, this stops. His momentum runs out of steam, and he gets put on the back foot. Well, we're about to see anyway. So we have a slight mismatch here. Dot has an extra tank deployed to the south, but he's making the offensive here, so defender has an advantage. He's getting worse trades in that regard. In the center, Girth has already made some gains. He's pushed the leftmost flank of the center, and he's pushed pretty far forward. What's interesting here is that I always thought that it was not good practice to keep your units on the front line and then start depleting the health. For me, it was always like once the morale depletes, if you can, without breaking too much of the battle line on the front, pull it out, recover the morale, then commit it back. Try not to deplete the health straight away. But that doesn't seem to be the case here, and so that might be another like flawed theory that I have that I've been playing in my mind. It's not to say that you should always pull it off when the morale depletes. I don't do that all the time either. Depending on the situation, right? Usually for me in the early game, that's what I do. And then when you get to the late game, I've discussed this in another video where it was like a very big, massive battle that went on for quite some time. When you get into the late game, there's like because of how the game is designed, there's a nuance of strategy. What you do in the opening and what you do in the end game are two completely different things. The strategic calculus changes as the game progresses. So usually in the end game, that's when I don't focus too much on the morale of the troops on the front line, because usually in the end game, there's big plays being made by both players that you need the combat power to have been deployed on the front line to make the plays. And usually the economy game has already been like played out and whatnot. So here you can see that the center is now being pushed back. And we're now down 20,000 troops, almost 30,000. Yeah. The only way I could see reason why is because of how hard that Girth was pushing. And Dot didn't, as I've said so far, he did not pull back his troops and try to cycle the morale. He just kept them on the front, and they traded like a lot in terms of health. And I'm just assuming from just the base core mechanics, because the defender has an advantage, the trades just went heavily in favor of Red, and that's why the situation is developed as such. In the south here, the flank has been pushed back because Red has deployed more armor onto the plains tiles. But overall, Red is still keeping his two tanks in the northern side. I've switched back to calling the colors instead of the names. I'll go with the colors instead then. But yeah, Red is still keeping his two tanks from the initial deployment in the north, and they don't see much play. I don't think they see much play until the very end when it's too late. That's how I recall the first time that I skimmed the match about a week ago. So now what you're going to see here is what I wanted to discuss in previous videos is that Girth is now going to start playing the defensive game. And basically the initiative switches once again. And the deficit in troops also switches once again. I'm assuming due to defender's advantage. He's closer to his cities now, so he's able to cycle a lot. And if you haven't been paying attention to its cycling, both players are cycling like mad all over the place from all the cities that they can. Even though it's all the way far back, you can kind of afford to do this because you're all using light units. If it was tanks being made, then you would have some problems because trying to maneuver in this forest, it would take like a million years to try to get them all the way back to the rear cities and then all the way back to the front line. So I think the right call of going just full lights was definitely the good call for both players. So you can see the deficit in troops is now almost equalized. And it's around about here that Girth is going to start making some plays. If I recall correctly. No, the game goes on for a little bit longer, so no drastic plays get made quite just yet. I think that Girth is just waiting for Dot to make a mistake, and a mistake is made here in the south. He manages to catch a couple of units in the encirclement on the retreat and wipes them out. Yeah, the advantage of just being closer to the cities, keeping reserve units in the back here. This is another interesting thing that I didn't quite recognize the first time that I played, and it was something that I've commented on in the previous video and a video before that. It was like the difference between using reserve units and then cycling the units to the cities. In my mind, there's always been like two sets of cycling. You have the units that you pull back just behind the front line to recover morale, and then immediately switch them back onto the front. And then you've got the other set of units which you cycle back to the cities to recover their health more. Um, in that last play there, you could see Girth keeping a lot of units just behind the front line as the quote-unquote reserve is what I call it. But Dot here, Red, he didn't have that uh, in play basically. I Since I've seen this happen 3 times, I think there might be something there, theoretically speaking. It probably needs to be studied just a little bit more. I am stretched thin for replays. This replay and the previous one sent by Schnitzy. These are the only 2 other replays that I've seen from players that I've never encountered in game before. Because as I mentioned before previously, I play during the low pop hours, so I don't see a lot of like the top level players. I think they're all mainly NA and EU based. I'm Southeast Asia, so my experience in playing with like a lot of the good players that are out there, I don't have a lot of that experience. So it's a little bit detrimental to me because it means trying to learn the game. It takes much longer time, and because the player base overall is quite small, there's not a lot of like high level content being shared around there. Usually, most of the replays that are posted on YouTube is usually like mid to low level, and it's usually involving like really fast blitzkrieg type of games or like big blunders being made by both sides. So yeah, Girth is now on the offensive. He now has the numerical advantage by about 30,000 troops. I think the mistake here was that Red should have pulled back his front line just a little bit. Well, the other thing is that Red also has to deal with the problem that he has to cycle across two bridges. He only has one city on this southern side of the river, whereas Girth has two cities. And his other cities, they have two ways of going, two other bridges, whereas, Red does also have just two bridges, so cycling, I don't think there is a chance for there to be like a traffic jam of any kind. Yeah, yeah, I think just having the two cities just on this southern side here is like a really big advantage, and then having the front line be pushed like that far forward, Red should have redeployed by pulling back to the initial deployment zone. At least that's the way that I'm reading the situation here. I usually never had too much problems playing on Red's side on making plays in the southern side of the river here. But once again, as I said, the caliber of players that I usually play against, they are on the lower end. So maybe I've not been tested properly in that regard as to playing on this map. Hopefully, I get feedback from Girth on this replay as to what his thoughts were as the game was being played, and whether or not I'm right on some things here. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Who knows? We're getting to the end game here, and yes, now here's the interesting thing: the troops have equalized once again. Girth has been on the offensive for like the last 5, 7, 10 minutes or so, and is equalized just a little bit here. But here's another thing that I've been thinking about is the trade-off between your troops and space on the map. I don't know what the exact numbers are or how you can properly evaluate at what point losing a certain amount of troops to gain a certain amount of ground, and of course what kind of ground is also important. Like if you're just gaining ground on like the edges of the map where there's no cities or no like uh tactical it doesn't give you any tactical advantage, is it like worth it? Whereas if you're pushing into the center, let's say, or right about here, and you're pushing straight for an enemy city, how many troops is it worth to gain that much ground? How do you calculate that? I'm not entirely sure if there is actually a set definite amount that can be calculated and say, yes, this was the right move for this amount of trades. I think at this point in time, the way the game is being developed, and not being developed by the game developer sense of like the mechanics, but being developed by the players themselves, developing the meta, the ways to play, all this and that. I don't think we've quite gotten that advanced and deep yet into the meta, basically. Of course, the meta just means the most efficient way to play the game. At this point in time, I'm not entirely sure what the meta. I think the meta is just go full lights. That might be something. Ooh, very close snipe on the city there in the north. Red is making a Hail Mary play there, trying to get across over there, and he almost got it. He got quite close. But he saw that his city into the southern side of the river here was almost good as gone. He tried to make a last minute play. Props to that play. Last minute clutch naval invasion. Didn't quite make it, but it was a hell of an attempt. It was a hell of an attempt. Another thing I forgot to mention was the economy, the funds. I didn't mention this in my previous video, but the same thinking goes. I used to think that there was a set amount of like funds that you could identify the disparity between the two players, where you could say that one player has now a decisive advantage. I haven't quite seen that actually play out. In this match here, at one point, I think Girth was in the lead, and then it switched over to red and then switched back over. I think it switched a couple of times. Um, and the disparity was like in the thousands of eco, and it didn't really determine much on the outcome of the game. I mean, on the outcome of pushing on the front line, I should say, not the outcome of the game. That's an incorrect statement. Um, no, I don't have enough gameplay footage or replay footage to quite properly analyze or assess if there is any correlation between having much higher eco and having a decisive advantage in the ability to influence the front line. But it is something to think about. It is something to think about. I'm just like spitballing all the ideas and all the things that I've seen so far playing the game and now watching good players play the game. But hopefully somebody else out there figures it out, or if I keep playing the game, uh, I might be able to figure it out. Who knows? But there you go. Top level gameplay for War of Dots. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all for the next one.